So for today's podcast session, we have interior designer Meghana Nimmagadda with us from Designtales. Hi Meghana, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am doing great. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving us chance to feature your site in our 7th edition. It was great to feature a nice project in our magazine, which added a value to the magazine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for publishing me. It was an honor. Thank you.
How do you find our magazine?
It is really nice, and I think, you've explained, I think it bridges the gap between vendors and architects and designers, and also between architects and designers and clients, because even though we're so active on social media, on Instagram, it's not that easy for clients to find designers. A lot of my friends only come to me and say, "Oh, I didn't know that you were an interior designer," even though I post about it. So it's not that easy to reach people, I've realized. So I think in a lot of ways, it bridges those gaps.
Oh, and would like to know about your journey, interior designing, how you entered, what inspired you to be an interior designer?
I think I was always into doing creative things. I like design from a young age. But like any Indian parents, my dad wanted me to do engineering. So I was shipped away to Dubai. I did my engineering from BITS Pilani, Dubai. But after that, I knew I wanted to pursue interior design, and I've applied, I got in. And for 3 years, I studied interior design in Pratt. And I think in terms of experience, I've really had a very contrasting experience compared to Dubai, where everything is wild and people's imagination is wild. Like when you think of design, right? There is underwater restaurant, there is revolving towers and stuff. And then you go to New York, and then I think life is real. People are struggling, and every square inch counts. It's not about luxury; it's about efficiency. Right. So I think my personality is really shaped by these really contrasting experiences I've had. And right after graduating, I moved back, and I knew I wanted to start my own firm. And so here I am 7 years later.
Right. So you have started your practice in 2016.
2016, yes.
So basically the course what you have done is for 3 years.
It's 3 years because it's a master's program,
Okay.
But there's a qualifying year because I'm not an architect. I had to go through that year, after which they combined the class with architects who came for the master's degree.
So your internship you did in India, or you did that in abroad only?
So I did 6 months of internship in Singapore, and that company was mostly into hospitality.
Okay.
And I did 6 months of internship in New York as well. They were mostly into office spaces. They've designed Morgan Stanley office and all of that. So I've had both those very different experiences.
So how difficult was to switch over to India and work here? Was it difficult or was it easy for you? Did you cope up easily?
It was difficult work-wise because I think you expect a certain level of professionalism, and I think at least when I started, it wasn't very common. You'd pay a premium amount to workers who are more accountable. You're literally paying for accountability, in a lot of ways. Even today, that's true. So I think, but over the years, it has changed. I see a major shift, and at least in the last 2-3 years after COVID, I think people, and also there's a lot of construction happening, and PMC is a lot more common, and back in the day wasn't. So even the contractors, and I think India is changing so rapidly, and everybody has internet now. Everyone has WhatsApp on their phone. I remember in the beginning, I wanted to be paperless. So I didn't believe in printing a lot of plans. It was very difficult. Then we went through a phase where we laminated those plans, right? Like the printed sheets so they don't get torn or get spoiled. Then that didn't work because they would get lost. But today, I don't even have to try that hard. I just have to send a WhatsApp message, right? Like everybody. And it's much easier because then you can zoom in, you can zoom out. So including a fall ceiling person, a painter, everybody, we just have to send WhatsApp messages. So I think that transition has been phenomenal since the time I've started. But initially, yes, it was very difficult.
So what are your views on social media? Like many people, many aspiring designers especially, get influenced by social media in this industry. So you have Something to say about that? कि how helpful, मतलब pros and cons both, advantages and disadvantages basically.
So I think with social media, we should be very aware of its potential, because if you are aware of its potential and possibilities, then you can use it as a tool, as opposed to you getting manipulated or you getting, influenced. You need to be very aware, constantly follow what other people are doing outside of India also, because social media's algorithm is set in a way where it shows more of what everybody around you are watching, right? So you get narrower and narrower and narrower into your your inspiration is just around you, and so I think it kind of is very restrictive that way. So once in a while, go follow El Decor Italy, or see what other countries are doing, and so just my suggestion is to just be aware of what Instagram is doing and try to use it as a tool. You use it rather than it using you, is what I'd say.
Now, what is your forte basically? You're into residential segment or commercials?
We mostly do residential. I would say 90% of our projects are residential. And initially, it was supposed to be a stepping stone. We were supposed to do hospitality because, I think in hospitality, you get a lot of free hand in terms of experimenting with concept and, in really interesting, cool things happening. But I think eventually, over the years, I fell in love with residential, I think, because it's a lot more personal, it's a lot more meaningful. And the material selections also, because it's for somebody's house, they want for it to last forever. So I think we tend to use durable materials and clients are okay to pay for it. Whereas in hospitality, it's very short-lived, right? Like in 2-3 years, it gets torn down. And so, people don't care about durability. So I just think, it doesn't sit well with me, unless it's like a really big hotel project where, it's still people are okay with. It's going to last forever. So I think that's why I like residential. And I think people spend a lot more time in these spaces. So it's very meaningful. It becomes like a backdrop to their memories. So even if it does get torn apart, like in 10 years, it's kind of immortal because it's in somebody's memory forever, right? So I think that way it's a lot more meaningful. So we do residential.
So in the starting stage of your career, your Singapore internship has supported you because आपने वहाँ जा किया था, and they were more into hospitality.
They were into hospitality, yeah.
So that might have helped you a lot.
Yeah. It's a very different philosophy. I would say Singapore, I think it was very, I won't say spiritual, but I think very philosophical in the way that they approach. They have a lot of Zen gardens, and the company that I worked for, they designed Shangri-La hotels and stuff, like big scale, right? So I think it was a very different approach. So I think it really inspired me to do hospitality. I mean, I hope I can do really nice hotels and stuff because again, those influence people a lot, like residential.
Like it's been 7 years you started your practice. Do you remember the project which has given you a name in the market, or that was your stepping stone from Meghana Nimmagadda from Meghana to interior designer Meghana? Do you remember that any of the project which has given you the stepping stone?
I would say, I think recognition-wise, my first project in DSR, the first. I think after that I got multiple projects in DSR, the first itself, after people have seen that project. It was a really interesting project. We had some budget to work with, so I think it was interesting. But I think what shaped me as a designer was one of my friend's apartment in Banjara Hills in Brigade. That was interesting because as designers, I think we're taught to come up with a concept, right? Like in school. And everything that you do should be dictated by that one concept, which is great because it gives you direction. Because in a market where there's some 1,000 options, you need to know why you're picking a certain option. But I think that project kind of broke that for me in the sense that the husband wanted something else, the wife wanted something else, which is almost always the case. So because of that, I think I opened up this, these preconceived, we should do only one particular design style and like the entire house should be in that style. And I think that opened me up to this eclectic design style where I now in all my projects I mix multiple design styles. There's like a traditional piece right next to it, there's a contemporary piece, and I think creating that balance is very challenging, and that's very interesting. So I think that project shaped me as a designer, whereas recognition, I would say DSR the first.
And generally, what is your approach? When you get the project, so how do you approach? How Designtales approach for that?
So we actually start with a line or a poem. Because I think in today's day and age, where AI is everywhere, and I think AI and robots can really do everything that we can do. The only thing that sets us apart is human emotion, right? So our concept starts with that, like what do we want for this person to feel when they enter the space? And it's difficult to kind of put a feeling in words. So then we come up with a poem or a line, and that's where the project starts. So it can be about the client. Sometimes we've done a project where both the wife and husband are doctors, so they don't have any time to spend or any time to go out to travel. So we wanted for the house only to be feel like a staycation. So we called it the staycation, So sometimes it comes from the clients, but sometimes it's also the context. We've done one in my home, Bhuja. And as you know, there are thousands and thousands of units. It can be overwhelming for somebody to cross all those elevators and go up to the space. So we wanted for it to kind of be very different from what they've experienced, very, calming and stuff. So sometimes it comes from the building itself. So, but it starts with like a very poetic concept for residential, yes.
So when you design, what is more important for you, aesthetics or functionality of the place?
I think it's always trying to balance between two. I think everything in life, is always in the gray. I think people like to live in either black or white, but it's never that, right? And I'm a strong believer of that. It's always about trying to create balance, between professional life and personal life. And, so even with design, it's always that balance between aesthetics and functionality. It should solve the problem, but it can also solve the problem in the most beautiful way possible. Right? So, okay, we are trying to conceal a beam, right? You can just do false ceiling and close it, or it can be more beautiful. So it kind of creates an impact on somebody who's seeing it.
You mean to say you carry both hand by hand, aesthetics and
100%. But it should not be so much so. You should also be respectful of the resources you use, right? Because when it comes to aesthetics, you're cladding like the entire wall, with plywood. It's a lot of natural resources. So I think you can be very simple and still trying to deliver aesthetic value.
Okay. And would like to ask you, most important thing is, especially for a female, how do you manage the execution of the site? Because generally it is very tough to deal with the laborers who are working at site.
Right.
So you need to lose your temper and shout, which is generally female doesn't do on sites actually. So how do you cope up with that situation? वो आप समझा रहे हो आपके कारीगर को, वो कर नहीं पा रहा है. So how do you deal with situations and how do you maintain the timelines of your project?
Okay, that's a very good question actually, because I think in the first 2-3 years it was very difficult, because it also changes you as a person, and so you have to see if you want to allow that, right? Because I'm a very soft-spoken person. I don't like to yell at people at all, and somewhere you carry that with you. You do that at site, you carry that with you home, and I think I wasn't liking that. So I felt like there has to be a better way of doing this, and like we talked about, I think there's also a shift slowly. Like people are more exposed now. They're watching reels, they know how to behave, they know what is the way to talk to somebody. Everything is changing, so I think it has become easier. But also, like, even my team, so I have a lot of women on my team, so sometimes I do feel like, okay, maybe I should send the guy to the site, it'll get done. But I went through that phase like about 4 or 5 years ago. But I was like, you know what, if I'm not breaking the ceiling, like, how? Like, I should be able to break this. And then since then I've only put women going to site. And at one point, now we recently hired men, but at one point I was an all women studio, and only they were going to sites, and they are not yelling. And we are getting things done. And it is by staying organized, having everything on WhatsApp, and you can sweetly ask people and they actually do it. I feel, at least it's worked out so far. And I hope it does work moving forward.
Every designer or any professional of our industry have some signature towards his designing. So what is Meghna's signature? कि देखे तो पता चल जाए कि हाँ यार ये साइड मेघना की है करके.
So I used to think that if people can recognize that it's done by me, then it is almost like a failure in a way as a designer, because then because it's my house, then it's not the client's house. It should look like what the client wanted for it to look like. But I think but apparently I do have a style. A lot of friends, they do go to someone's house and then they, even without knowing that I've done it, they do call me and say, I knew that you did this. So apparently there is a signature style, but I would say it's probably because I mix multiple design styles, and I'm not sticking to only traditional, only contemporary. So I think maybe because of that. And I think my strongest skill set is use of color, the way that I pair colors. So I think in that lies my signature style, I think.
So as I know you love traveling, so how does it help you in your industry while traveling? Like you keep traveling abroad, you visit Milan and everywhere. Is that helpful?
100%. I think when you're a designer, there is no line between your professional life and personal life, to be honest. Like, because when you're so passionate, they're always merged. So when I'm traveling for work, I'm also doing vacation. When I'm traveling for vacation, I'm also doing work. And so when I say work, even when I travel forward, even when I'm on a vacation, I'm observing, okay, how did they do this, or how's the real estate market here, or how different are the details here, and why, and based on the weather, is that why the detail has happened? So I think this is something you always think about during your vacation and your travel. And as far as exhibitions are concerned, yes, I wouldn't recommend going every year, maybe every alternate years, and do different exhibitions, because yes, Milan is great, but there are a lot of other exhibitions which are much smaller, because then you also get to see like up and coming vendors and really small scale ceramic artists, and sometimes your concept just comes from a small vase. It doesn't have to be so great or big. So there's a lights exhibition that I'm traveling to, that's happening in Germany. So it's just a variety of things. It's not always furniture or something.
As an interior designer, if you get a chance to do something for our fraternity, what would you like to do?
A lot of things. I think we need protocols and systems in place. Because I think India is going through that transition, a major shift is happening. There are a lot of unorganized sectors that are becoming organized. Like back in the day, furniture was so unorganized. Now it's become organized, So similarly, I think even construction management, I think is on the verge of that shift. So I think I'd like to contribute to that. And I know a lot of people are trying to solve that problem. And to be honest, at one point, even with a team size of 6 people, I was managing 18 projects. And these are all like 6,000, 7,000 square feet projects. So, and the only way I could keep that going was because we are organized. We have systems and protocols. We have like forms. And if a fall ceiling guy, if an automation guy is coming and saying, okay, now everything is in place, you can go ahead and close the fall ceiling, we're getting a form signed that I have inspected. So I think just trying to bring that about. And I think a lot of architects and designers agree with me when I say that if that aspect of the execution aspect was a lot more organized, we could be doing so much more work and not waste time in like, the smallest of issues at the site. So I think that like in some way, if I could, share these systems and protocols, or have like some kind of discussion where there are some kind of market standards. Okay, this is how all the fall ceiling guys are supposed to do it, or something like that, or some kind of training program for the workers. Because it's not the architects that need to be trained, because architect is not there at the site morning to night, right? It's always the workers. So maybe some upskilling, or just how to read some drawings, because they're not even understanding some drawings sometimes, right? So those kind of things.
Fine. Thank you so much, Meghna. It was great discussing with you. Thanks for taking out time in your busy schedule.
Thank you so much for having me.